Hello. Before we get started, I wanted to put a word of warning. If any of my players by chance are watching my videos here on YouTube, I humbly request that you may watch the first section of this video. However, the latter of this video is going to be basically my insight for the sessions, as this is going to be a campaign diaries. So, if you do not want anything spoiled, and I hope you do not, and I hope you respect my wishes to not watch that section, then just refer to the timestamps within the video. The first part of the section is completely fine. It's going to be basically a recap, but the second half is going to be more informative, more spoiler heavy. So, thank you. Greetings and salutations. I am Professor Tabletop and/or Michael. For this video and for a few videos hereafter, I plan to do a campaign diary, so to speak, just because it's something I can simply do. It's easy to record, it's easy to talk on, so I figure in between some of my more informative and tips and tricks for D&D and things of that nature, I figured I would kind of fill in the gaps with a few campaign diaries, as well as I will have a video recording of a recap for my players to watch. So, two birds, one stone. In any case, without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and get on with this video. For this first video, there's going to be a little bit of extra information, such as who my players are playing, what their characters are like, a little bit of information on them. Nothing too much that the other players don't know about each other. So just a little bit of information for you guys to kind of get up to speed, so to speak. I will also be speaking on the world and the topic of the story, so a little bit of information to bring you up to speed at where we've started, what's going on in the world, etc., etc. Additionally, we are already on our 11th session here coming up this weekend, so for that reason, I'm going to begin to shoot and recap the 3 sessions at a time. So this video will be on session 1 through 3, the next will be 4 through 6, so on and so forth until we catch up. So to give a little bit of insight as to the story and concept in the world that my players are playing in and that I am DMing, first and foremost, it is a homebrew world completely made up by myself, inspiration taken from a number of different places, but the core concept of the story that I prepared was from what my players wanted. So before we started this campaign, after our last one that we finished after 2 years, I gave them the option of either a steampunk renaissance game, a pirate game, and/or an honor-bound samurai game. They chose the honor-bound samurai. So this story takes place within the Dentonian Empire within my world. It is a very radical kind of place. There are a lot of strict laws. Almost think if you've seen the movie The Last Samurai. So the section of the world is preventing anybody else from entering inside or anybody else leaving their community. And they are highly traditional and very against innovation. They think innovation is something that will stampede over their traditions, and that is not something they want. So while the rest of the world is innovating and growing stronger, there is that steampunk renaissance outside of the Dentonian Empire. Within the Dentonian Empire, it is still highly traditional, and it's stuck many years behind the rest of the world because of their highly valued tradition and laws that they have in place. Now, the story does touch on a few darker themes, I will just inform. Some that I made previous to 2020, but there are some very kind of coinciding things that are happening in the real world and this game, which I did not intend for, but what happened happened. In any case, so for some of the themes within this, within my world, are because they are highly traditional and for reasons that I know of and I have written into the lore and I have very specific reasoning and everything for. The Empire has a set of very traditional, very honor-heavy laws and traditions that tend to teeter into what many would consider tyrannical and very harsh types of laws. These laws also teeter very heavily into types of persecution, where certain races, such as anything that is of a mixed race, such as half-elves, half-orcs, tieflings, things of that nature, even when it comes to the different human races mixing their cultures together, that is highly frowned upon. In addition, the arcane within the Dentonian Empire is highly forbidden and banned. Divine magics are completely fine, but the arcane is not so much. Another one of the laws that was put into place is gnomish individuals, because of their innate creativity and innovation and skills that they have to do such things with, they are forbidden within the Empire. They are arrested on sight and sent to these rehabilitation centers within the capital of Dento. So that is also another one of the very harsh rules and restrictions that the Shepherds of Freedom are fighting against and trying to abolish all of that. Now, of course, I try and be incredibly respectful with all of these themes that are running through. If there's ever a moment where my players or I do not feel comfortable stepping or treading upon, they let me know, and I feel like I'm very good about not diving headfirst into something super harsh and toxic, for instance, for the game. I like to implement those things without making anybody feel uncomfortable. But keeping that in mind, there are some pretty hard themes throughout my campaign. But the premise of the story is that Emperor Izoko Suro Dento is the emperor and leading his empire, adding all of these new rules and regulations. Over the past 25 years, his rules and regulations have gotten even worse. The laws that restricted and persecuted certain people started to become worse. People who were previously just fined for stepping outside after curfew or things of that nature are now immediately jailed or heavily fined and jailed, or taken to the empire, to these rehabilitation centers, so to speak. And the Emperor's laws and regulations are enforced by the Phoenix Samurai, as they are known. Along with the Phoenix Samurai, there is also the Black Phoenix Samurai, which the Black Phoenix Samurai is going to be like the left-hand man. So the right-hand man is going to be the advisor of the Emperor, Sada Inokuma. But the left hand, if you will, is going to be the Black Phoenix Samurai, which is going to be a very elite set of samurai who perform very special tasks given to them by the Emperor. However, the whole point and focus of the story is around the Shepherds of Freedom, a resistance group that has over the past 25 years been building up, collecting resources, collecting people to help them on their cause, inside and outside of the Empire. And now they are rising through the Empire, slowly taking out sects of individuals, people who are corrupt and evil within the Empire, and their plans are to overthrow it, either by diplomacy or force, whatever they must, to change the ways of the Empire. Also, a little disclaimer, as this is an honor-bound samurai game, a lot of the names of the places and people are going to be very like Asian culture inspired, taking a lot of inspiration from Chinese, Japanese, and even Indian cultures and things of that nature for the names and everything. So if I butcher a pronunciation or I have added in something that is either a little on the nose or something weird like that, that is my, unknowing. So I do apologize in advance for that, just in case. And if, there is some insight that I need to be informed of, please let me know of that. But without further ado, where this campaign starts is in the continent of Taiyang, within a small mining town at the base of the Saketsui Mountains called Koseki. Now, in the Dentonian Empire, it is separated into three main regions. There is Need at the north side of the empire, which is separated into two continents. They are the brother and sister continents, both collectively known as Need, but the western is Hwei-yung, and the right one is Fang. The central continent, where the capital is of Dento, is Nippon, and the eastern continent within the Dintonian Empire is Taiyang. So within Taiyang, at the base of the Seketsui Mountains, is going to be Koseki. So for the past 25 years, the Shepherds of Freedom have been building their resources and collective forces outside of the Dintonian Empire, but only within the past year have they made their trek back into the Empire and started growing and distributing their forces. So there are a few places and strongholds that the Shepherds of Freedom hold within the Dintonian Empire, one of them being within Koseki. So, within this small town of Koseki, the party all finds themselves in the company of a woman named Murasaki, the leader of this stronghold of the Shepherds of Freedom. Now, before I go and get fully into the story here, I am going to give a little bit of a rundown of all of the characters, and when I do get into the story, I'm going to read it almost as if it is a recap to my players. So that's how I will be reading it, so it will be a recap for your enjoyment. However, after the recap, I am going to give a little bit of insight from my own personal perspective as the DM who has also created the world. So that is for also viewing enjoyment. However, once again, do not want my players watching that. It is going to be incredibly spoiler heavy. First off, I'm going to go through a few of the NPCs as well as the players and just give a little brief explanation, trying to only divulge the information that they have given to the other players. As this was a kind of a secret player making, I would give my other players information like, alright, there is a ranged fighter, there is a healer, there is this, that, the other, but besides who they were, their race, class, etc., I did not divulge any of that information. So, over the past 11 sessions, from what they know, I'm going to explain to everyone else what they are, at least in that aspect. Trying to keep a little bit of the secrets that may or may not still be within the party dynamic, still a secret, and let that divulge naturally as we play our sessions. So for my first player character, his name is Anam. So Anam is a Scourge Azamar Kinsei monk. He is an individual who is working very directly with the Shepherds of Freedom. Exactly and specifically his affiliations, the party doesn't necessarily know, but Anam is obviously well taught, well trained, a very prestigious martial fighter, as well as very connected to the Shepherds of Freedom. My next player is Bura. He is a human fighter who has a very particular set of skills, no reference intended, but he does bear a certain set of skills that his order does as well. So his order is all about keeping peace, protection, and ridding the world of evils. Anything more than that, the rest of the party doesn't really know all that much. But a little bit more information on Bura will kind of come up as I explain the story. Hwei-yung is a human samurai fighter who has defected from the samurai, not enjoying the traditions and the prejudice that is within the empire, and has left them and joined the Shepherds of Freedom within the past year that they have been within the empire. So Hwei-yung is also pretty affiliated with the Shepherds of Freedom. Not necessarily as much as Anam, but definitely affiliated, and has been for definitely the better part of a year. Not a full year probably quite yet, but definitely has a lot of experience with the Shepherds of Freedom and holds many of their ideals. Jasper is another one of my players who is a Water Genasi alchemist, mutant alchemist, which that is a homebrew class that my player found. He really enjoyed it, so he asked me if it was okay. I read through it a little bit. It's interesting, but everything seemed to kind of pan out pretty well, so I allowed him to play this alchemist. It's interesting. That's about all I can really say about it. But he too is a member of the Shepherds of Freedom as well. Jasper as well is a very low charisma individual, despite my player who is, if you had to give him stats, very high charisma. So I sense that it is a touch hard for him to really get into that, but it is very fun to watch as Jasper has well below a 10 in charisma and speaks mainly in kind of grunts and just kind of idle, like, you want me to do something? Okay, that's fine, sure. Yep. It's very interesting. Kinkuru, or Deru, as he met the party as, is a assassin rogue, a human assassin rogue. It has been found out pretty recently that he is actually a noble from the Dentonian Empire. Not one of the larger nobility, but one of the lower sect nobility, where his father is the best way to explain it is a retired samurai, a higher ranking samurai. So probably like daimyo, I want to say, is what was agreed upon. But after that, and after an honorable sacrifice, Kinkuru's family was given a position of power. Of course, within the empire, Emperor Dento has absolute power, but the nobility court is like a rung above the actual like commoners and citizens. So Kinkuru's family sits right above that. But it has been found out that he is at odds with his family, not wanting to uphold the traditions that they hold so dear to them, and has left since then, and has this vendetta against his father. You know, classic rogue stories. My next player is Retsu. Retsu is a dwarven cleric. It has also been found that Retsu is also of nobility, but rather than nobility fully, as he is a dwarven individual, and nobility is strictly given only to the Nipponian individuals, rather than the Nedian, Tyengian, or Dwarven, or Elvish. So he is more of a retainer for one of the noble families. A very prestigious retainer, but still a retainer. Retsu as well has been found to be all about family and honor, that kind of dwarven, stereotypical, honor-bound, all about family, very lawful individual. Retsu has joined the party to join the Shepherds of Freedom and rise to the ranks so that he can prevent and stop the fighting within the Empire. Joining the Shepherds of Freedom, they can make a stand and stop the Empire from all of their prejudice and fighting against one another. As because of all of this fighting, it has been found out that Retsu has lost a child, as well as had his second child gravely injured because of all of this. And Retsu simply wants to see an end to it all. Also, I should mention, it is known that Retsu is also a cleric of the goddess of death within my world. Another one of my former players now, whose character is now an NPC, it was Skaxious. He is a human cleric of the god of the sun. Skaxious has seemingly joined the party as a very devout and faithful man. He has seemingly come from a different land, as his accents and mannerisms are definitely tells that he is not necessarily from the Empire. He is definitely somebody who has came from the outside. He also holds a mission to himself that seemingly is quite devout in nature. However, he also bears a few dark secrets, as within the sessions of play, it was found out that Skaxious has some type of corruption to him. After taking out a few individuals, dark, inky-like tendrils began to seep from his body. Whatever this meant for him, the party, and otherwise, may be seen later. My NPC, who is, I guess, in a sense, you could consider them a DM NPC, which I know is very taboo in a lot of tables. However, as a DM who doesn't get to play super often, and the NPCs that I tend to make for this type of situation are very much so there for they can inform the party if they get stuck somewhere, and so I can, in character, kind of direct them if that character, of course, would have a bit of insight on the situation. So if the party gets stuck and they need somebody to investigate, and Tan, I think, is good at investigation or perception or whatever, then I will have them roll. However, Tan is not there to steal loot or give answers. The only answers Tan will give is if it makes sense for him to understand such things, or if the players ask him. And when it comes to loot, the party are the ones who give him loot. If they give him nothing, he gets nothing. Think of him more as a retainer, I guess you should say, rather than a DM NPC. However, he is a human drunken master monk. He is super fun to play, He's very monotone and a little brooding and a little standoffish, but you know, from the players who, even though I've created this character to kind of be this very distant individual, they have flocked to him like birds of a feather, and it is incredibly fun to play and very interesting to watch that dynamic kind of unfold at this brooding, kind of distant individual slowly be forced out of his shell because all of my players enjoyed speaking with the brooding character. It's very fun. The last and the newest member to the party is Yomi. So also, you can probably tell, it's a very large group. And I have some rules in place to try and help with how large the party is. But in any case, Yomi is a half-elven warlock. And she too is a member of the Shepherds of Freedom, also rather recently. And so Yomi, Hwei-yung, Jasper, and Anam all do know each other, as they were all in the same stronghold together within Nippon. Yomi kind of following suit, telling the party as well as Murasaki that she has been sent here to help out with the resistance, to push forward. And so she has joined. She's a little sporadic, a little like two-sided, having a more reserved side, but also then having a very like kind of chaotic side to her. She's fun. She's very interesting. But that's pretty much Yomi. Also, side note, probably should mention, they are all at 10th level, by the way. They decided to start the campaign at 10th level and then go to 20, by the way. For the next bit of this video, I'm going to kind of read off of a script. As I said before, this is going to be more of just the base recap of what has happened from session 1 to 3. So I'm going to go ahead and read through that. Hopefully, I'm going to lay over this with some fun pictures to enjoy as I just recap this. And then once I come back, I'll give a little bit of insight on all of this, some of the players, some of the things that have happened, and just kind of talk through everything, just to give a little bit more insight and intrigue into the story. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut to that. From different walks of life, they found themselves in the company of a woman by the name Murasaki, and her apprentice, Yuzan, in the back room of a paint shop. How fate, should it be real, have brought them all here is left a mystery, but fate or not, they all have purpose to be there. Murasaki spoke of the resistance led by the Shepherds of Freedom, and that they are responsible for the salvation and those persecuted under the rule of the Dentonian Empire. And it just so happens that she is a part of that organization. Each of them with their own personal goals, some falling more in line with the Shepherds than others, deciding that joining them, at least for the time being, would serve to be quite beneficial to each of them. Upon accepting Murasaki's request for help, in exchange for what assistance she may be able to provide, the mission was given to them. The task would be to make one last push here within Koseki, the mining town in southern Taiyang. Here, innocent civilians were imprisoned for nothing more than breaking the more restrictive rules made by the Great Emperor. These rules would include those at the bottom of the caste system asking for higher pay, staying out after curfew, or simply thrown in jail because they looked suspicious. This final push was to break them out and lead them to an extraction zone hidden away within the Koseki mine a few miles north of the town. And it was now or never, as the left-hand men of the Emperor, the Black Phoenix Samurai, were hot on their trail, so they would use the cover of the Harvest Festival on the night to cover their escape. Splitting up into separate groups to make the best use of each of their skills, Bura, Tan, and Skaxious distracted the northern gate guards through knocking them out or having Bura distract them. With an increased speed, Bura easily had the samurai running in circles. Kinkuru, going as Daru at the time, and Yuzan posed as a samurai and infiltrated the jail, where, with great deception and sleight of hand, they managed to pull the keys free from the on-guard samurai and persuade the others to rush to handle a confrontation within the open market where the celebration was happening for the festival. Jasper and Anam, after following Bura, Tan, and Skaxious, took a cart from a friend of the shepherds who manned the stables and drove the cart to the section of the city wall where specified by Murasaki earlier. All the while, Retsu and Murasaki snuck their way past the guards. With magic, they teleported into the jail's courtyard and opened an arcane door in the jail itself, releasing the captives. Following one another, Murasaki, with the last bit of her arcane ability, managed to teleport everyone out of the courtyard and bore one last hole through the city wall, getting to the cart, traveling around the city, picking up those guarding the entrance, and dashing off into the Skaxious Mountains north of Koseki. From here, they made their way off to the Koseki mine, where through illusory magic a secret underground water system was found. Here, a section of the shepherds were stationed with a massive metal ship to transport the civilians out of the Empire. Anam met up with someone he had not seen in about a year and caught up with them for some time before having to leave. The man Anam spoke with was Totoro, a human man who captained the ship. He was older, suave, and in every sense of the word charismatic. After leaving the mine, they continued north through the mountains until being ambushed by one of the many threats of the Skaxious Mountains. Ogres, orcs, and half-ogres ambushed the cart, destroying it in the process by rolling a boulder down into the horses and seeding of the cart area. A fight ensued with luckily no casualties barring the horses. From here, it would be on foot that the party would travel the rest of the way to the Onsen village, where Murasaki mentioned they could acquire some much-needed supplies before continuing on their long journey north. Arriving at the village with no other issue, they were greeted by a bipedal man with an elephant's head. Massive in size, the creature introduced himself as Nahul, the village leader. Taking some time to settle down after the travel, Bura noticed a commotion within the center of the village. With expert perception, he began to investigate the issue, and it was found that accusations were being made that a humanoid fox-like individual named Theoperch was being accused of murdering his fellow hunter. This village of bipedal creatures of all shapes and sizes that was a safe haven for any and all was already a vastly different sight before the following commotion. But through Bura's investigation and questioning, Theoperch presented Bura with a sample of hair said to have been pulled from the hide of the beast that attacked Theoperch's companion, Henrik, a half-elven man. Bura determined that it in fact wasn't any ordinary fur. It was darker, thicker, and more coarse than regular fur. This was the fur of a lycanthrope. From here, it was requested that the party aid the village in ridding themselves of these lycans. Knowing the threat ahead of them, Bura requested that everyone equip themselves with something silver. Having much knowledge on this, Bura guided the party in doing so. However, not having much silver to spare, the party did what they could, getting the local blacksmith to band their weapons with silver. This method of silvering wouldn't hold up forever, but for the time it served its purpose. Bura, already with a two-handed great sword, fully silvered in and of itself, had no need for this. Before heading out, they decided to rest there within the village. In the morning, they were greeted by Murasaki, introducing a new member to them, Hwei-yung. Hwei-yung, seemingly already acquainted with Murasaki, easily joined into the ranks as another member to help the overall goals of the Shepherds of Freedom. With greetings out of the way, they all agreed to set out into the mountainous woods to find the lycans and where they hide. Stumbling upon the site of Henrik's murder, with the tracking skills of Bura, and a spell to find half-elves from Retsu, they found the grisly scene. Investigating the scene, they caught another trail that led further away from the village. After making the trek and fending off an ambush of lycanthropes, with the divine powers of Skaxious and Retsu, they ended up removing the curse from 3 of the 4 that attacked the party. From the survivors, they were able to give the party vague bits of blurred memories that gave insight to the trials ahead. At the end of the trail they follow is a small house that sits in front of a cave. The cave is where over 24 lycanthropes have settled. The description of this location is known to Bura, and their location within the mountain confirms to him that what is now in the hands of the lycans used to be a reliable contact for Bura and his organization. After gaining the insight they had from the rescued survivors, they decided to head back to the village where Jasper and Retsu concocted a plan to use some herbs Retsu had picked up back in Koseki that would induce a paralysis to any who ingested it. Jasper, being a great alchemist and being aided by Retsu, they managed to formulate a poison that could be used to poison a source of food. The plan was to hunt some type of larger game, which wasn't hard to find in the mountains. Place the poison within, and feed it to the lycans within the cave. Once the plan had been made, a night's rest was had, and the game was killed and poisoned, they were off to the cave to rid it of its new infestation. So that is the recap of session 1 through 3. I hope it was interesting, and I hope that should more of these campaign diaries come out, you'll enjoy watching them. So, and for future references, we'll probably just be jumping right into the story and the recap rather than the extra information, as since that has already gotten taken out of the way in this one, no, didn't need to do it every time. Maybe a short recap, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, this is the section that is going to be more focused on DM insight as well as giving context for what is going on through my perspective. So this is also the time where, once again, if any of my players are still watching this, please, I beg of you, leave the video. Your job here is done. You have watched what you need to watch. Please leave, or else there will be a lot of spoilers. So without further ado, I want to talk about some of the secrets the party has amongst themselves. So, as I mentioned, this was a secret character process when we started the campaign. So, a lot of the players do have some secrets about even what their classes are. For instance, first and foremost, and the one whose story we are on, is Bura's. Bura, who is seen as this very prestigious, very stoic kind of fighter, is actually, if you are familiar with some of the classes Matthew Mercer has put out, he is a blood hunter. Specifically, Order of the Lycan. And this order is all about seeking out Lycans and other fiendish and evil entities within the world and putting a stop to them, keeping peace and protection and order within the world. Or at the very least, within their sect of the world. Bura is keeping his cards very close to the chest at the moment. He has not used anything that would denote what his origins are, besides the use of his blood magics to, in very recent sessions, engulf his blade in flame. But he has yet to show the party his lycanthrope transformation. So that's pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited to see when that happens and the players and the other players' reactions to that, as not a lot of the other players watch Critical Role. I'm kind of mainly the only one, so not a lot of people know about that subclass or even the Blood Hunter class to begin with. So it's pretty interesting. I'm excited to see their reactions. Also, something the party does not know about Bura, but it has become increasingly clear, is because of Bura's class, race, feat that he took, as well as just because of being a Lycan and having advantage on perception checks for hearing and smell, he has effectively a 25 passive perception for hearing and smell, and a 20 passive perception for sight. So it is very, very difficult to pull the wool over his eyes, or ears in this matter. Anyway, but Bura is a very interesting character. The first arc of this story is mainly about Bura and going and finding, which will be informed in future sessions, the Black Moon. The Black Moon is this fiendish lycanthrope entity that has been terrorizing the Seketsui Mountains and the entire continent of Taiyang for dozens and dozens and dozens of years. And the Scarlet Order has been combating this fiendish nature for the entire time as well. So they are what keeps this at bay. However, the lycanthrope problem seemingly has gotten out of control. Why that has happened? Well, at this point in the story, the party does not know. They know now, but I'll keep that information for future campaign diaries. In any case, once again, Bura is a fun character. I'm excited to see his story progress. We are right at the tail end of it now, actually, as of this coming up session, but it's going to be interesting to see. Another little bit of fun information is about Anam. So Anam is actually the child of the founders of the Shepherds of Freedom. The Shepherds of Freedom were founded 25 years ago, as soon as the Emperor started to really heighten the laws and regulations and persecution of the Empire. Anam's mother and father founded the Shepherds, escaped from the Dentonian Empire and begin to gather their forces, knowing that the Empire was only going to get worse. So that is why he is so very connected to the Shepherds of Freedom. And the person that Anam spoke with, the ship captain, Totoro, is actually his father. So that was very interesting, because since coming back to the Dentonian Empire within the past year, Anam has been separated for the first time in many years from his mother and father. And Anam has been one of the major leaders within another section of the Shepherds of Freedom, while his mother and father are doing their own things as well. So it's been a year since he's seen them, and being able to meet back up with his father after quite some time was a very nice reunion. Also, another fun fact about Anam is he is a monk because his mother, another Azamar, was a monk from Eastern Need within a monkin temple up there. That is where she learned all of her abilities and passed those on, those traditions, abilities, and skills to Anam. Another little bit of insight into the players, Yomi is a Pact of the Fiend. Her story is very interesting, and I'm very, very interested to explore it even further. The base concept, without dragging on for terribly long, is after being separated from her mother, an elven woman, she basically pleaded to the gods, asking anybody to answer her because she needed help. The empire is falling apart. She knows it. She has been watching it fall apart for years, and her mother has finally been taken by it. What has happened to her mother, she does not know, but it has driven her to become distraught in this moment. And she is calling out to any god that can see or that can hear her. And something answers, but it is no god. Instead, it is a deep, fiendish entity that speaks to her, granting her and promising her gifts of the arcane and powers that will help her overcome the Empire and fight back. Upon accepting, this entity has corrupted her mind in a sense, not taking her free will away from her, but this entity sits in the back of her mind, speaking these words of prodding destruction, almost as if there is a horribly bad influence always on her shoulder. A devil on your shoulder, if you will, poking and prodding at every decision she makes, saying how she could overcome this if she was just more enraged. If she just avoids diplomacy altogether and just goes straight to the nitty-gritty of everything, that this conversation can be over quickly, and things that she wants can be had faster. So all of these poking and prodding decisions are in the back of her mind constantly. And this fiendish entity is less of a devil and more of a demon, and that creature is a Sybrix. And if you know, you know. It's a very high and powerful demon within the Abyss. There is more information on this that I have that I don't quite want to divulge just yet, but I will say the Sybrix is not the sole person behind why Yomi was pacted with. There is a greater force at hand, but the Sybrix is the one communicating with Yomi. But due to this fiend, this Sybrix that sits kind of on the shoulder of Yomi and whispers these doubts and these prodding feelings, has made her character very two-faced in a way, which I think is a very interesting kind of role-playing way to go about it. We described it kind of to each other as Yomi naturally is chaotic good. The Sybrix is chaotic evil. And living with the Sybrix for so long, being this horrible influence on her, has basically made her chaotic neutral, in a sense, is kind of how we've done that. So she has moments of being chaotic good, moments of chaotic evil, but she'll usually kind of fluctuate and kind of stay within the sphere of a chaotic neutral character. it's been very interesting to watch and see that role play and all of that. It's been very interesting. Hwei-yung, on the other hand, while they are indeed a samurai, and they are legitimately a samurai of the Empire, but the fun secret about Hwei-yung is he is not a he, and rather a she. Their parents were super, super harsh in all they wanted as a Mulan family, or Nidian family in my world. They desperately wanted to have honor and prestige placed upon their family. So, after having 2 girls, they chose Hwei-yung, naming him a more masculine name, as well as forcing her to present as a man. Very, like, almost dark rendition of Mulan, in a sense, instead of her wanting to fight for her family and putting on the guise of, like, a male presenting kind of name and form and everything of that nature. It was her parents who already did all of that for her. And so he has been living this life and this lie for years and years. And because also in the world, one of the traditions that is also very stupid is the idea that women are meant for, like, gatherers. They can help out with things, but it's the men who can, you know, own shops, be a samurai, yada, 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 all that, you know, classic stuff. So there is that as well. So Hwei-yung has been a samurai for many, many years and has always kind of battled with that internal struggle of, well, my parents, they just want honor, and that's fine. You know, that's what the Empire wants. Honor is above all within the Empire. However, you know, I don't enjoy it. And after being present for a lot of the harsh and dark things that the samurai have done within the Empire, Hwei-yung eventually snapped and just said, no, I do not want to know, I do not want to do this anymore. And around that time, she also found the Shepherds of Freedom. And so Hwei-yung became almost a spy for the Shepherds of Freedom, working both sides, informing the Shepherds as she did more samurai duties and all of that nature. She would tell the Shepherds of Freedom all of the information that she would gather. But now, as the Shepherds are ramping up to finally strike back against the Empire, Hwei-yung has left her station and fully joined the Shepherds. In a different continent, her prestige and ability as a samurai is still there, and she can flaunt her position as much as she likes, and she can get away with a lot. However, when she gets back to Nippon, things might be a little different. So, we'll see how that goes. Skaxious, who once again is now more of an NPC than anything, but Skaxious has a very interesting story. First and foremost, and a few of the players with just passive investigation was able to figure this out, but Skaxious is actually a tiefling from outside of the Empire, devoted to the god of the sun in my world. He has come into the Empire being told that there is a fiendish nature about the Empire. Something is wrong, and his celestial patron, as he is not a cleric, he is actually a warlock of the celestial. His celestial patron has told him that there is something preventing divine sight within the Empire. Something is very wrong, and Skaxious is being the one to kind of be shepherded in, no pun intended, to the Empire and figure out and eliminate whatever this evil is. In addition, the player gave me this backstory that was very interesting, which was this story of, in his past, a demon kind of corrupting him, and his patron, the Solaire, spoke to him, and in a sense, with the pact that the Celestial made with Skaxious, the Solaire would bind the demon away so that he could never come through. In return, Skaxious would help in any way that he could and do the service and the duty of the Solaire's god. the god of the sun. Before Skaxious went into the Dentonian Empire, his patron knew he would not be able to contact Skaxious as well as he was within the other parts of the world, as there is this block of divination there. The Solaire basically gave him one last task: eliminate this demon once and for all. And so when you go into the Empire, there will be nothing harboring within you, and so you can go freely. So his session 0 effectively was a 1v1 fight against this demon, which is a modified, shadow demon? And doing it, broad daylight, super easy fight, especially for 10th level, a 1v1 fight wasn't really that hard. So with the demon expelled and destroyed, Skaxious actually spoke with Totoro, Anam's father, and he is the one who transported Skaxious into the Dentonian Empire. However, after crossing the boundaries of the Empire, Skaxious started having these dark dreams. These dreams that showed Skaxious this demon within them was not truly gone, was not truly lost. And now, without the Solaire being as present, that connection is still there, but it is very restricted. So the Solaire cannot even prevent this demon from taking over. And it came to light that when he killed, whether through his warlock abilities or his blade, the souls of these creatures were pulled to him. Every time a soul was taken, and it was taken by the demon, his charisma would go up. So in turn, his spellcasting would go up, and it made him more powerful. However, after he met the cap of 25 for his overall skill, there was a chance that after a failed Constitution saving throw, the demon would take his soul. But Skaxious, his story is going to be furthered through NPC means. So as, once again, the player is not here anymore. So, for that matter, his story is still very interesting, still an NPC, still going to go through it, and the players may kind of see a bit of that progression, but why celestial presences aren't so, seen here anymore, which could be a reason that the fiend that spoke with Yomi was so easily contacted and not a celestial. So that is also a little bit of insight that is, I think, not to toot my own horn or anything, but pretty well done. I thought it was very interesting. Any case, a few more points, but next up is Tan. So my NPC. Tan is not truly a human, and Retsu found this out. Retsu and Skaxious found this out. Skaxious, who showed Tan that he was a tiefling. In return, Tan, in this moment of comfort, basically told him, hey, don't worry about it. I've never really seen anybody like you, but, I'm not very looked kindly upon either. And after moving a bit of his hair out of the way, he could see the pointed ears and the faint kind of like golden specks within his eyes. That kind of denotes him as more half-elven. In turn, that spell that Retsu cast to find Henrik, in specifically looking for half-elves, did ping to him Tan as well. Also, Tan is not his real name. It is actually Kokai. He is fronting this fake name kind of in a sense of like, he's a person with a dark backstory who doesn't feel like he deserves much, not even in the sense of friends, as well as everybody that he has known and cared about has left him or has, died or whatnot. So he kind of has this dark mentality of, if I don't get close to anybody, I can't be hurt by anybody, is kind of the idea. It's very that very like heart-throbbing kind of story. So he puts a fake name to kind of put up a wall, so to speak. And that's why it's very, very interesting that so many of the players want to get to know Tan, because that's the last thing he wants. But Tan is also a very gentle soul and a very kind heart. He just doesn't want anybody to know that. Anyway, so that's a few of the things. Now, something very interesting is, and normally I do not do this. However, it is a plot point that I am putting into the story, and it's very interesting, and that is 2 of the players are spies within the Shepherds. And what I mean by that is they are spies for the Empire that have joined the Shepherds of Freedom. They are a part of a secret organization known as the Keepers of Belief. This group, this order, has been around for the past 25 years. As these new rules and regulations begin to influx in the Empire, that is also when the Keepers of Belief formed. And they are like a radical group of the Emperor's will. So they are the ones who, if the samurai are prevented by law from getting something nefarious or something done, the Keepers will step in and do it. It's very, very harsh, very awful. It's a bad group. And the players are taking it very, very well. They're not being harsh or super apparently evil. Their mission is basically infiltrate the Shepherds, play nice with them, and keep us contacted. If you get to one of their bases, let us know and we'll find it. Another one of the Keepers is the head of the Black Phoenix Samurai, who is after them as well, and they are keeping in contact with Kinkuru, who is leading them to their bases. So, and there was a little bit of conflict with Bura and Kinkuru. I'll get into this in one of the the campaign diaries, but something that happened was there was a bit of a conflict with Bura and Kinkuru about this, and Kinkuru, that is the point where Kinkuru told him his real name is Kinkuru, as well as not Daru, as what he was presenting as. He was being called out for dropping these little stones at places they went that Bura, with his high perception, was able to pick up on. As well as Kinkuru tried to drop a mask, the mask of the Keepers, and try and get it out of his inventory. But that was heard by Bura, and there was a little bit of a confrontation. Kinkuru with some, or the player of Kinkuru with some pretty good deception and like some good role playing, managed to not only roll well, but verbally kind of like talk the talk a little bit and kind of evade that confrontation. What Bura and Bura's player thinks of that is to be found out in due time, but that is still, once again, a topic for a future campaign diary. Additionally, the second spy is Retsu. Retsu is a cleric, but a blood cleric, which is also another Matthew Mercer class. Retsu is also a member of the Keepers of Belief, and Retsu and Kinkuru are basically, they were given this task together. Kinkuru as this assassin rogue, and Retsu as this cleric who has like access to spells that can send messages back and forth very, very quickly. Combining those two, they have a very easy interaction with the Keepers, and as well as the head of the Black Phoenix Samurai. And so Kinkuru, not truly at odds with his father, and actually highly agrees with his father in these radical traditions. And Retsu, still a loving man of his family and wants nothing more than the safety and security of his family. And he does truly wish to seek an end to the fighting, but not by helping the Shepherds. He wants to see the Empire win. So that's also very interesting. A little bit more, just kind of pieces of information here. Mitsumichi is another NPC that I have not mentioned yet, but Mitsumichi has been met by a few of my players. Anam has met him, Bura has met him, and Jasper has met him. Mitsumichi Fenakutsu is the son of the noble family who founded the Phoenix Samurai. And he is the daimyo, or the second in command to the leader of the Black Phoenix Samurai. However, Mitsumichi is slowly losing his faith for the Empire. after learning that he is a sorcerer and trying to push that down for so long because the arcane is frowned upon within the Empire. When this new leader of the Black Phoenix Samurai, he found that out. The leader, Buraku. And for whatever reasons, Buraku is forcing him to actually use that arcane power to help the Black Phoenix Samurai, which would technically go against the Empire, but there's forces at work here that I'm still going to keep a little bit of a secret here, just for future inquiries and insight that I can divulge later. But for now, just know there's definitely some deeper threads within the Empire. And Mitsumichi is basically being held to these standards by Buraku, for if he steps out of line, his children who have been taken by Buraku will be punished. So there's this dynamic there within the Black Phoenix Samurai that is very interesting to kind of think about. As the Black Phoenix Samurai are following, how is Mitsumichi trying to help? Because Mitsumichi, as he is losing his faith for the Empire and has pretty much at this point lost his faith for the Empire, it is interesting to think about what Mitsumichi is doing subtly and quietly to try and diverge and stop the Black Phoenix Samurai as a whole from destroying the shepherds. Mitsumichi sees an opportunity and a chance for the Empire to be redeemed and basically eradicated of all of this harsh prejudice and tradition. But he can't step too far out of line either. And that's very interesting to think about, especially with the whole dynamic of Kinkuru and Retsu being a part of the shepherds, leading the Black Phoenix Samurai to these locations, but also thinking about Mitsumichi trying to avoid these things. It's very, very interesting to think about. Only other character that I can really talk on who has some interest, I think, to her is Murasaki. Murasaki actually was taken from the Empire by Anam's mother and father. Anam, who was barely a year old, under that even, not even a year old at this point, was taken out of the Empire about 25-ish years ago. And Murasaki was on that ship, and she met Anam's parents and baby Anam. Murasaki, over her 25 years growing up growing up outside of the Empire, learned the arcane, and she became a very prolific, a very prestigious arcanist. And so she has a vast knowledge of the arcane, and so she is joined back with the Shepherds of Freedom after she heard that they were finally taking the stand against the Empire. She joined back with the Shepherds to make this stand with them. And so she was given a direct job as one of the direct leaders to the Koseki base of the Shepherds of Freedom. And so she is very, very high ranking within the Shepherds of Freedom as well. Not necessarily so much as Anam, probably about on par actually, maybe a little under that. But so she also knows Anam as well, and there's that kind of connection that has been hinted at a little bit. And there is that relationship that has been mentioned within the campaign where Murasaki on one of these travels basically stopped with Anam and kind of let him know that she knows his parents, asking him, have you seen them recently? And there was this talk of how Anam had not seen his parents in the past year and how Murasaki, felt for him and all of this. And it was very fun to role play out. So Murasaki having that connection with Anam and the Shepherds as a whole, I thought was very fun to be played out. In any case, I think that is going to wrap up the insight for what I have to talk about. There is still so much to speak on, things that are behind the scenes, things in more recent sessions that have happened that are super interesting that I want to talk about, but I have to leave those for another session or another video. But without anything else to go off of here, I guess I hope this video was informative, enlightening, or at the very least entertaining, and I appreciate it.